Well, leg 2 of the cross-country qualifier complete. Really not too bad on the last leg home. Just enjoying a mandatory break. Roll titles. Well, hello everyone and welcome to week 54 of my life as an L3 CTS cadet pilot. Hope you enjoyed that little slightly longer than normal introduction there. If you hadn't worked out already, I've now successfully completed my cross-country qualifier, and that flight also signifies the last time that I will fly the Diamond DA-20 Katana in New Zealand. As a matter of fact, that's the last time I probably will fly a Diamond DA-20 for the foreseeable future, because that is it for the whole course for Katana flights. So, also this week, I also finished up on the IFR simulator phase of training. So, but before we go on to the IFR sims, I'm going to talk about the cross-country qualifier. At the time of recording, there's about a dozen different routes that we can do. Hence why I've got the map up behind me for this one. Oh, one thing worth noting, I am aware that the camera has had a few focus issues on the last few videos. Trying a different setting this time, but no guarantees it's going to work, so apologies if the focus goes out a little bit every now and again. Anyhow, back to the cross-country qualifier. There's a few different routes you can do. The most popular one goes up towards Dargaville and Whangarei. And the reason why that is the most popular one, because A, you're going up the Northland Peninsula, so it's quite visually spectacular, but it also requires not much terrain clearance, so it's a very good bad weather route. Who did I speak to? I can't remember who I spoke to about this, but one of the instructors did say that about 95% of cross-country qualifiers here at L3 go up the Northland Peninsula because of bad weather. But that was not the route that I did. I ended up doing a route that not many people do, because generally, as I said, most people do that route. And there's another route that a lot of people generally do, and that is down to New Plymouth and down to Whanganui and then back up to Hamilton. That's another good route that people do. Get to see some of the higher terrain down towards the south. But it's not the route that I did. If you couldn't tell from my previous video, I actually planned on doing Hamilton to New Plymouth, pretty much direct, a little bit of a deviation so to make sure I wasn't over the water for too long. And then after New Plymouth, flew from New Plymouth over to Kinloch, which is a little town up by Lake Taupo. Then flew towards Taupo, but because of parachuting operations I couldn't overfly it directly, so I flew to within about 2 miles of it, then turned to intercept track to Whakatane, and then once I'd overflown Whakatane, I then flew to Rotorua, which is where I landed, and then flew on to Hamilton. So how did the whole flight go? Well, it didn't go as I originally planned it. Like, weather-wise, it was fantastic. Like, cloud base was 6,000 feet on this particular day, so it was certainly a very good day to do it on. But unfortunately, the aircraft I had, Sierra Foxtrot Juliet, let's just say was misbehaving, shall we say. So I was on my way down to New Plymouth. Got probably about a third of the way there, and I realised I was nowhere near my planned track. Now, the first thing that came to my mind was, had I corrected for magnetic variation during flight planning, because that can usually put you 20 degrees off. And that was about how far I was off. So I quickly did an in-flight check, and it turns out that I had applied magnetic variation, so it wasn't a flight planning issue. And then I was like, well, I'll do all the standard closing angles, came back on track, and I noticed all the way down to New Plymouth, could not get the aircraft to fly on a constant track. Headed I could, but not track. So anyhow, landed at New Plymouth, nice and busy as always. Seems to go in phases, New Plymouth. I've had times where I've been there and it's been dead, and other times where it's been absolutely heaving. On this occasion it was quite busy. Landed, made a full stop landing, refueled the aircraft. One of the standard operating procedures here at L3 is that we have to have at least half an hour in between flights. So I used this opportunity to go to the airport cafe in the main airport lounge at New Plymouth and got myself a sausage roll and a bottle of water. Because it was quite hot on this day, it was about 30 degrees Celsius, so pretty sweaty when you're in a katana that has no air conditioning. You're just relying on the airflow coming through the cockpit. It gets pretty warm, and a short sleeve shirt and some sun cream is a must. So once I'd taken my mandatory break at New Plymouth and filled up with fuel, I then started flying towards Kinloch, and then I encountered the same issue as I did on the first leg to New Plymouth. Straight away I noticed I was off course, and I was like, this is strange. Corrected it, got to about Ohura area, and at this point to Kinloch there isn't really much you can use to identify your position precisely. You can use big features like Mount Ruapeo, for example, but it's very difficult. So after I did my first correction, I then realised I just had to maintain track, and then once I got within visual range of Lake Taupo, I could then make the necessary corrections. So turns out I ended up straying quite far north of track. It was about 8 miles in the end, so that's quite a long way off course, but I got visual of Lake Taupo and flew visually to Kinloch. And it was at that point I realised that the directional indicator on board this particular aircraft was a bit unreliable. It was fine if it was calm and you was straight and level, but the second you did a turn or encountered some light moderate turbulence, it threw the directional indicator out a little bit. So at this point I was starting to suspect there was an issue, but it was visual flight rules and you can get away without a DI. Flew past Taupo and then pretty much flew visually to Whakatane, which when I got overhead Whakatane did a 180 degree turn, and I noted what the deviation was on the directional indicator, and it turns out doing a 180 degree turn, not particularly steep, it was a standard medium turn, it turned out it drifted by 20 degrees. So at that point I decided, okay, the DI I'm just going to assume is unreliable. I'm going to now do everything based on the compass, which is incredibly difficult to read, but that is accurate 100% of the time. The reason why we use a DI is basically we align the DI based on the compass, but after a while that will drift, usually about 15 degrees an hour. And I had been adjusting it, I've been doing plenty of cruise checks, so that wasn't the issue. Definitely the aircraft, sorry maintenance, but that's your fault. So anyhow, I flew to Rotorua, and at that point, one of my radios decided to stop working, so thankfully I was in the katana that had 2 radios, and I used the backup radio to get in contact with Rotorua Tower. Bit of an awkward moment when you call up 3 times and no one answers and you're approaching Class D airspace. Start thinking, oh dear, have I got an electrical problem with the aircraft? But no, it just turns out one of the radios was dodgy and it did end up getting teched after this flight. And then of course I landed at Rotorua. I made a nice short approach into there to make sure I didn't get held up by IFR traffic inbound, which turned out to be one of my mates, so that was quite entertaining. And then I took the mandatory break at Rotorua, which you saw in the intro of this video. Got to have a look at a few of the aircraft that were parked up, that was quite nice. And then flew the about half an hour flight back to Hamilton, nice and easy because I basically used the Rotorua and Hamilton VOR going there and back and confirmed my position using visual navigation. So basically pretty much binned the directional indicator and used the second radio to do my communications on. So I essentially flew 400, I think it was about 420, 430 miles roughly, with a defective directional indicator. One of my radios are packed up. So when I got back and I told the duty instructor what had happened, they were like, goodness me, that was pretty good going, that, because essentially I flew the second half of the flight on compass turns, which is not the easiest thing in the world. And if it wasn't for a route that I was familiar with, I would have potentially considered turning back to Hamilton. But given that how good the weather was on this particular day, I basically took a bit of a decision to say, well look, when am I going to get an opportunity this good to get this done? So basically I said to myself, I'm happy continuing, might as well just get it over and done with and take the aircraft afterwards, which is what I did. So that was the cross-country qualifier, a little bit more eventful than I originally planned, but hey ho, any experience is a good experience. And so yeah, that's the end of the Katans for me. So what else did I get up to this week? Got 2 more sims that I also did. Simulator 5 is GPS holds and approaches, and it's basically the same thing as VOR holds and approaches, but you're doing it with GPS. And with GPSs you can actually fly a standard arrival, or STAR as it's also known as, and it means you can fly a lot more accurately. The only problem is with the GPSs on an RNAV approach, which is basically final approach, it gets incredibly sensitive with instrumentation. We have to keep the localizer, the equivalent, within half scan deflection, which basically means we need to be within 0.15 of a mile of our horizontal track. That's really not a lot, and it means you fly a lot more accurately, but it means you have to work a lot harder for it. But it's good fun, and in the sim you can make mistakes, and that's the whole point of it. But the only problem with GPS flying is it's only good if it's set up correctly in the flight management system. If you set it up correctly, all you've got to do is do exactly what the primary flight display tells you to do. It will literally say like, turn left heading 270 in 10, 9, 8, and it literally gives you a countdown, and it goes 0, do the turn onto heading, nice and easy. Hardest bit is when you either get a change and you have to completely reconfigure the flight management system, or say for example you're in a hold and you forget to suspend the flight plan, and you want to do another lap at the hold, and the aircraft system suddenly thinks, oh, you want to do the approach now? Okay, I'll activate it automatically. Gotta remember to suspend the OBS, as they call it. So that was the GPS holds and approaches sim. I've got one more sim to do, and I also did that this week as well. And basically this final sim before the Cessna flights is basically a sort of mini check ride in the sim, and it's basically a way of confirming that you know what you're doing. Like, it doesn't have to be to a high standard at this stage, just as long as you know roughly what's going on. If you're completely incompetent, they'll give you a few extra sim flights. There's nothing wrong with that, because at the end of the day these sims are intense, and they, on my 6th sim I was given a couple of little tricky approaches to do. For example, the VOR approach into Rotorua, one of them has left-hand holds, the other runway has right-hand holds. Now most holds in New Zealand are right-hand only, so if you're doing a left-hand hold, it just feels wrong, and you just have to keep telling yourself, turn left, turn left, turn left, turn left, and it just gets even harder if you have to do an offset or parallel entry. That is where you can have a complete brain meltdown, and if you're going to have that, you've got to do it in the sim first. Don't have that in the real aircraft. So that just about wraps up what's happened this week. Thank you very much for watching. Feel free to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and feel free to share the series with anyone who you feel might be interested. Coming up in next week's episode will be the first of the Cessna IFR flights, and I'm very much looking forward to getting back onto a Cessna. It's been about 8 months since I've last flown one, so it's going to be good fun. See you next week. Bye bye.